Stakeholder versus shareholder management. Grand Canyon University Management, 8/15, February 12th, 2016. There's the abstract. Although stakeholder theory has been mainly applied in project management, as it appears often in articles regarding project strategy and project evaluation, it nevertheless can be utilized for managing an entire company. The question that the following slideshow investigates is if the stakeholder model of strategic planning should be applied to the management of the entire company. The slideshow will also investigate the short and long run impact of utilizing such an approach or continuing with shareholder theory. Although the slideshow is not intended to be a comprehensive guide for a transition to the stakeholder model, some recommendations are nevertheless given for making the transition. Now here we see some arguments for and against the stakeholder management model. There's a summary of the key arguments as they relate to corporate governance. Arguments for the stakeholder management model. The reasoning is that firms are responsible for distributing and creating value for the sake of their stakeholders, who in turn advance the interests of the firm through support and cooperation. The result is the combined production of social and economic welfare, both for the firm and also for the stakeholder. Perhaps the greatest benefit of stakeholder management theory is that it may promote long-run well-being of the firm, as stakeholders invest themselves in the firm and are likely to be motivated and committed to cooperate for the firm's survival. Competitive advantage and improved financial performance can also arise from serving a plurality of stakeholders and being socially responsible. Some arguments continued here. Since stakeholder management theory promotes people voluntarily coming together in order to improve everyone's circumstances, business and ethics need not be opposed to one another. That's a very important stakeholder argument right there. Trust and reputation can result in the implementation of stakeholder management theory such that access to resources can increase as the firm becomes trustworthy with accommodating stakeholders. The stakeholder management theory creates a win-win situation for many that have involvement with the firm. In summary, stakeholder management theory is practical on account of the fact that all firms have stakeholders. Even if the firm is not good at managing them, all firms nevertheless must manage stakeholders. Stakeholder management theory is efficient because stakeholders that are well treated often reciprocate. Stakeholder management theory is effective on account of the fact that it allows the firm the ability to harness the energy of stakeholders toward the fulfillment of the goals of the organization. Stakeholder management theory is argued to be ethical on account of arguments based upon integrated social contracts theory. Kantianism, that name is pronounced Kant, by the way, but that's Kantianism. The principle of fairness, the doctrine of fair contracts, the principle of common good, feminist ethics, and pragmatism. So basically, stakeholder management theory, the argument can be that it's practical, is efficient, effective, and also ethical. And that's basically what the stakeholder management theorists would argue and do argue. Now, the arguments against stakeholder management theory are listed here as well. Stakeholder management theory, according to the argument here, requires highly skilled managers because both the firm strategy and stakeholder management become intertwined such that building mutually satisfactory relationships become a never-ending task as variables change constantly in such a way that they cannot be set once and for all. In other words, it takes a lot of work to manage stakeholders. And a lot of firms won't be able to, or won't want to put forth the amount of work to manage stakeholders. Since cooperative relationships and trust are important for solving problems related to opportunism, stakeholder management theory can not be effectively implemented in an environment that trust and cooperative relationships cannot be established in. Stakeholder management theory may even be considered immoral by some because shareholders would have an interest in maximizing their own benefits without the unnecessary allocation of time and money diverted to others. So, your shareholders may not want to even consider stakeholder theory because they may feel that it allocates resources away from them and to the stakeholders in a way that's unnecessary. Here we see the arguments continued. Since the duty of shareholders is to hold managers accountable for the moral consequences of the activities of a firm upon non-shareholding stakeholders, stakeholder management theory may cause agency problems between management and shareholders. Such is true because shareholders are owners and managers are simply agents of the principles that the owners have put in place. And in other words, here what we see is that the duty of the owners is to hold the managers accountable, and it's kind of their ethical responsibility, not so much the ethical responsibility of the managers to take care of the stakeholders. So that's the argument you see with the shareholder theory here. Overall, the three main postulates of the shareholder management theory and against the stakeholder management theory are that a moral right to property exists. The relationship between the shareholder and the business is the same as the relationship between an owner and his or her property. Management takes on a delegated responsibility for the property of the owners. Managers must thus act in accordance with the wishes of the property owners, and this does not give any favor to the stakeholders. Basically, the idea that the owners own the property and they delegate responsibility to managers, and thus the managers must do what the owners say, it can kind of eliminate the interests of the stakeholders altogether. and that's the argument basically against stakeholder theory. That and the owners are ethically responsible for the firm, and not so much the managers. And that's basically the case there. When we look at the anticipated short-term and long-term ramifications of adopting the stakeholder model or continuing with the shareholder model, we look at the impact of both. We see what follows here. The short-term ramifications of adopting the stakeholder model. This is where we see that since the stakeholder model requires building mutually satisfactory relationships between the firm and its stakeholders with a focus on meeting stakeholder needs continually. Managers thus must act competently in handling such dynamics. That would need to continually look for ways of satisfying stakeholders in the short term. Managers really have to be thinking about what the stakeholders want here. For those that have a strong background in dealing with firms that uphold the shareholder model, short-term results of switching to the stakeholder model may involve a lot of confusion, uncertainty, and doubt about the firm's intentions being genuine. This would be the case because the workers and other such stakeholders that had been around with the shareholder model in the business, they may really question if the business has truly changed and if they're truly considering the stakeholders' interests, because they're not maybe used to that. Switching to the stakeholder model may require trust relationships to be built if they are not built already. In some cases they might already be built. We don't know. And if such relationships cannot be established, then switching to the stakeholder model may cause many power struggles, as everyone may try to win at the expense of others. This is something that may appear kind of obvious when you have a system that is put in place where the stakeholders are just basically a tool for the shareholders. When you switch to that and they're no longer just a tool for the shareholders, those stakeholders, they may not, they may be so trained to think in terms of being used as a tool that they may not be able to really express their own interest. And if they do express their own interests, it may be an issue where they try to use others as a tool, sort of like using the shareholder kind of thinking on others, and it may not actually be very productive at first, and that's the case that I'm making here. The long-term ramifications of adopting the stakeholder model. Firms that diligently seek to serve the interest of stakeholders have been found to create more value over time. Since adopting the principles of stakeholder management has been understood to lead companies to frequently engage in proactive and/or accommodating behaviors for crisis management, a long-term ramification of adopting the stakeholder model is that the firm can be well prepared for crisis. And that's really significant there. Adopting the stakeholder model can have a long-run reduction in the amount of legal and regulatory actions taken against the firm. While the stakeholder model provides many possibilities for ill will, or I should say, while the shareholder model provides many possibilities for ill will and the desire for retribution among stakeholders, as shareholders may sometimes benefit at the expense of the stakeholders. Just the opposite can be true for the stakeholder model that promotes goodwill through serving the interests of stakeholders. Now, some of this is rather obvious. If your shareholders feel like they're always being disadvantaged and always feel like they're being treated wrongly, they may, when they get out of your firm or when they get out of the firm, they may go on and be part of government and actually or inspire government regulations to exist. And where you've got a situation where the firm uses the stakeholder model, you wouldn't have that desire for inspiring government regulations. The short-term ramifications of continuing with the shareholder model. Continuing with the shareholder model can cause the immediate interest of stakeholders to be overlooked and neglected. And with some extreme cases, the short-term ramifications of the shareholder model can take the form of one, autocratic management that controls employees through fear, high turnover in order to keep employees fresh, unilateral benefits and wage cuts, little regard for employee morale, expressed hostility toward unionization. A lot of these points here can really be in extreme cases. If a firm continues with the shareholder model and really tries to maximize that, it can cause a wide variety of things that can be detrimental to stakeholders. And this is the kind of things that can happen. The long-term ramifications of continuing with the shareholder model. Legal and regulatory actions may result from the long-term implication of the shareholder model. Stakeholders or formal stakeholders that may have not had their interests met by the firm may cause long-term social and political problems that undermine the firm's success in the industry. Some firms find that they must satisfy stakeholders through utilizing employee stock options in order to motivate, recruit, and retain employee talent. In such a case, the long-term benefits of the shareholder model would be that top talent would own a stake in the company and would have their needs and interests met. Conversely, however, firms that do not provide employee stock options but utilize the shareholder model may drive away top talent in the long run, as employees may not have had their interests met. And here we see some recommendations for shifting to the stakeholder model for ensuring a balance of stakeholder interests. And here I'm applying the current research to making the switch. Here's the first recommendation in terms of collaboration. Now, 3 ways exist that managers generate influence on collaboration. We find that it's through the relationships that they cultivate by memberships they empower and support, and through the process that they manage. One recommendation, thus, for switching to the stakeholder model of strategic planning would be for managers to list all the relationships, memberships, and processes that they are responsible for, and to identify all of the stakeholders that have a stake in each relationship process, and membership. Managers could next identify any stakeholder interest in each process, relationship, and membership that is perhaps being ignored or neglected. And here's recommendation 2. This is for development. In an article written about talent identification, development, and athletics, suggested that stakeholders should get together and identify appropriate means and practice, volume of practice, and type of practice. In a similar way, jobs could be designed around employee needs, and this could help, especially in regard to employees that have disabilities or problems with doing certain tasks. Since talent training programs can help to develop a complex talent that merges cultivating capacity, imparting knowledge, and improving quality, having a talent training program for new and existing managers may help to improve characteristics that stakeholders agree are desirable. And that talent training program may really help as well. All these ideas here, they could help with long-term implementation of the stakeholder management model in developing people within the firm to be more able to show like a connectivity or the importance of others. This is kind of the idea here. Now, recommendation 3, this deals with planning. Some have found that the implementation of new strategies can occur best through developing stages and mapping resources needed for each stage. Now, planning a shift to the stakeholder model strategic planning could thus take several stages of conversion, as top managers would be first to be retrained, followed by middle managers, next followed by low-level managers. And then each type of stakeholder would need to be evaluated and relegated to the new firm strategy. Since conversion may be unpredictable, planning for large margins of error may be necessary. Really, with the planning process here, it's very important to be able to kind of visualize how this is going to occur and how it's going to occur, like in stages of development. It's not like one day somebody just says, oh, we're going to switch to the stakeholder model and this is what it looks like, and everybody says, okay, that's what we're going to do, and then it just gets done. I mean, this is something that will take careful planning and how this is going to work, because otherwise the implementation may be rather poor. And it may be poor not because people intend it to be poor, but it may be poor because there's just so much confusion and stuff, and so much uncertainty about what the final project's supposed to look like, or what the final transition is supposed to look like, and how it's all supposed to occur. And so that's why it's important to be able to plan this out in stages and be able to assign resources to each stage. The fourth recommendation, and this is possibly one of my favorites here, is marketing. It might seem kind of odd, but it is very powerful. Since a powerful marketing department has been found to enhance a firm's long-term future total shareholder returns, even before the positive effect on the short-term return on assets, marketing should be used strategically to maximize the firm's potential. By incorporating the marketing department in the company's transition to a stakeholder model of strategic planning, such that the firm markets its new approach, many new opportunities may arise on account of information about the firm's stakeholder approach being disseminated to the public. Now, the idea here is when you market that you've got this transition, you made this transition as a firm, other people in the industry, or I should say stakeholders, other stakeholders in the industry, whether that be future employees, whether that be suppliers or people you do business with, they may be attracted to your business because it may be something that they want to see. They may want to see a business that utilizes the stakeholder management model, and they may be attracted to it. Recommendation 5. This is what we see when we look at measurement. Now, financial statements before the transition could be measured against financial statements after the transition for the first month, 6 month, year, 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. The stakeholder surveys could be administered both before and after the transition at several intervals, as well as in order to identify the amount of goodwill that has been generated in following the transition. Appraisement of the firm's sale value could be conducted before and after the transition in order to see if the transition increased the firm's market value. An appraisement of the industry both before and after the firm's transition could also be appropriate in order to determine any offset of outcomes due to changes in market forces. Now, some of this here with the recommendation of measurement is just more or less to kind of gauge how things have gone since the transition occurred. It would be ideal as well to kind of measure how the firm's been doing in comparison to other firms in the industry before and after the transition. And a lot of this kind of gives some ideas about how well stakeholder management really is, and where the firm needs to be going in the future. And here's some references here. There's several very important references that were utilized. Just a wide variety of resources. And you can see that these are some high quality resources here.